Now, as the name of the video implies, this is the 12th and final part of a story. So if you haven't seen all the other parts yet, this likely won't make any sense to you, so links to all previous parts will be in the description below if you either want to start or continue the story from where you left off. And for everyone else, without further ado, let's finish this story. For the final time, we find ourselves on a lush blue and green world, in an ancient stone tower, where the father, mother, and daughter are being confronted by Ren, the son, and a half dozen of his knights who are armed with crude-looking melee weapons. And the mother has just declared that the child she carries will not be Ren's salvation, but instead his doom. And to that, Ren replies, "The dark side has granted me visions of the future, visions where the Skywalker shall gain an unrivaled mastery and understanding of the Force and become ruler of the galaxy." Ren then takes a few steps forward, and his eyes go to the dagger resting on the pedestal in the center of the huge room. Looking upon it almost longingly, he continues, "And in these visions I have seen my own destiny, and one day I shall take up the weapon of the creators and destroy the Skywalker and take not only his power, but his knowledge, his ability to truly bend the Force to his own will." That's when the daughter speaks up and says, "The dark side shows you lies. Your old master wants me to tell you that it's impossible to ever truly bend the Force to your own will, that not even the Skywalker will be able to accomplish that he's only meant to restore the balance and to forever subdue the dark side." Ren, looking furious to hear that, takes an angry step towards the daughter, but the father quickly moves to block him. Standing face to face now, Ren says to the father, "There is no way for you to win here. If you strike at me in anger, you'll only lose yourself to the darkness you're trying to stop." Seemingly not caring, the father clenches his fist and draws it back as if he's going to hit Ren. But as he does, the nearby knights all raise their weapons in a threatening manner, and the father never swings. Ren then smiles from ear to ear and continues, "As I said, there's no way to win. Whatever you do, you will lose, and the child that your wife carries, the Skywalker, will be mine." The father then glances over his shoulder at the mother, and the two silently lock eyes for a long moment. Finally, the mother moves her hands to her stomach and says, "No matter what, he must not get this child." Without another word or thought then, the father turns his head back around and swings his arm forward like he's going to punch Ren. But instead of physically hitting him, he opens up his hand at the last second and unleashes a force push that sends Ren and his knights flying backwards, leaving only the son standing there. The father then rushes forward to his son and extends a hand out to him and says, "It's time to come home with us." For several seconds, the son looks at the hand and seems conflicted about what to do. Finally, he begins to reach out to it, but at the last second, the son forms a fist and raises it up towards the father's throat, catching him in a force choke. The mother cries out in horror, but doesn't seem to know what to do. Quickly then the daughter moves forward, towards her brother, and casually raises a hand and breaks the force choke holding their father. Her brother looks angry and like he's going to do the same to her, but to him the daughter says, "I know the one my father calls master has been speaking to you too, telling you what our destiny is, and you know that you will not be able to harm our father, and you and I will not be able to harm each other, and together we will do all we can to keep the balance until the return of the Skywalker." The father, having obviously overheard this, then looks at his daughter and says, "What do you mean, the return of the Skywalker? What's going to happen?" But before he can get an answer or ask any more questions, a crude-like spear weapon hurled by Ren himself from some distance pierces the father through the back of his shoulder and sends him crumbling to the floor, screaming out in pain. Ren then begins to quickly march towards the mother, and she begins to back away, and in so doing, she bumps into the pedestal. Quickly then she turns around, takes hold of the dagger, and holds it in front of her and warns Ren to come no closer. Ren only laughs, keeps approaching and says, "You truly have no idea the power you hold in your hand right now, the power to both create and destroy anything, the power of life and death, the power of the Force itself." The mother glances down at the dagger in her hand, then at her husband on the ground with a spear protruding from his back. Then she quickly looks at both her children in turn, before finally looking at the dagger again and whispering to herself, "The power of life and death, to create and destroy." Her eyes then drift up at Ren, who draws ever closer, and to him she says, "And the power to stop you." Screaming out something like a battle cry, the mother raises the dagger and charges at Ren, but she only gets a few steps before Ren casually raises a hand, palm open and extended out, and freezes the mother in place. Looking almost sympathetic then, Ren says to her, "Power is all but useless without the knowledge to wield it, and though there is power within you, power within that dagger, You never bothered to acquire the knowledge to use any of it, never sought to become all you were meant to be. And now, thanks to your lack of ambition, you have failed. The mother, as she struggles to break herself free, then says, No, Ren, ambition only leads to one's own ruin, and my lack of it, my acceptance of the will of the Force, has made me the perfect vessel for this child. She then closes her eyes and continues, But now I will oppose that will, and I will accept the consequences that will follow. I will do what I have to do to stop you from ever getting your hands on this child. But know this before you die, Ren. He will come again, and he will forever end the darkness and bring a lasting balance to the Force. The mother then seems to partially break free of Ren's Force hold, getting control of her arm and hand holding the dagger. She then turns the dagger towards herself and plunges it into her own stomach. And as soon as she does, a blinding wave of light explodes forth from her and washes over everything in the room. And when it impacts Ren, he cries out in pain and puts his hands to his face, and through the cracks between his fingers, we can see that his face has been badly burnt. And as the light continues to stream out from the mother, Ren eventually seems to just disintegrate within it. That's when we see the father is back on his feet. The spear that had impaled him is gone, as is the wound in his shoulder. And now he's holding the hands of his two children, tears streaming down his face, as the love of his life, a once beautiful woman, seems to slowly be transformed into something else, something horrible to behold. And to his children he says, This is my fault, and now we will all have to pay the price. So here we shall remain, my children. Here we will keep your mother safe, and the galaxy safe from her. Here we shall do all we can to keep the balance, until a chosen one comes about, until a Skywalker can finally and truly balance the Force again. And with those words said, everything slowly fades to black, and the scene ends. We then find ourselves back in the very same tower, a great many years in the future, and we see Luke Skywalker speaking with the Force ghost of his father, Anakin Skywalker, and jump back into the middle of a conversation between them, and hear Luke say, I'm confused, Father. You say I have it within me to become the balance, that I could make sure the dark side never again rises, that the Jedi would no longer be needed to fight back and prevent its corruption, that there could just be a lasting harmony, and that I would not have to do this alone. Anakin gives a nod of the head, and Luke continues, Does that mean you would stay with me, that you would help me do this? But to that, Anakin shakes his head and replies, I had my chance to bring about a lasting balance, to fulfill the prophecy of the Skywalker, but I failed. And now, as I said, I exist in a place much different from this one. I could never stay here. But there is one who would stay with you, one that was meant to stay with you. Immediately, Luke falls into deep thought, and for several long seconds we watch as he tries to puzzle out who his father could be talking about. Finally, his face lights up and he says, But she would never stay with me. We hardly know each other, and the dark side is with her. But Anakin shakes his head and says, The dark side is in everyone and everything, my son, but it is with no one. There are only those who think they can wield it, those who think they can use it for their own gain, or those who even think they can save the ones they love. But all who choose the dark path, no matter what their intent, will fall prey to it. They will come to serve it, to be consumed by it. But it is not impossible to turn from that path, and those who do, for better or worse, will come away with a better understanding of the Force itself. Luke begins to think all that over, and as he does, Anakin continues. You are the reason she will turn from the dark side, my son, and with her guidance and love, she will be the reason you will never fall to it. There is a faint look of hope on Luke's face, but he ultimately shakes his head and says, How can you be so sure she'd stay with me? Anakin replies, Through the Force I have seen many possibilities, many realities that will never come to be, and in almost all of them, you two find each other, and find a way to balance each other. Anakin smiles slightly and continues, And so you will fulfill the prophecy of the Skywalker, and bring a lasting balance. You will draw to you the light and darkness, and keep it in check for the rest of time. And by your side she will remain, balancing you while you balance all there is. Luke, looking almost a bit frightened, then replies, For the rest of time I will do this. Anakin quickly says back, It will not feel like an eternity. You will live out a normal lifespan here, while the ages of the galaxy and the very universe pass by until all that remains is the cosmic force. That's when the scene shifts, and we see Mara Jade standing alone in front of one of these strange archways that seem to be portals or windows to other times and places. And within it, she sees herself holding the hand of Luke Skywalker as the two walk through what appears to be some type of beautiful, vibrant green landscape. Mara then says aloud, "Why is it showing me this?" And she jumps a little bit when she gets an answer from a voice we recognize to belong to Anakin Skywalker. "It's showing you what you truly desire." Mara then glances all around her before asking, "Who said that?" Anakin replies, "You knew me only as Darth Vader." Mara laughs and replies, "Vader, huh? Your voice is lacking a certain level of, shall we say, intimidation." Anakin then says back, "That's because Vader was destroyed by me." Mara, looking skeptical, then says, "So you're trying to tell me what Luke said about Vader is true, that in the end he turned from the dark side, that he was the one that destroyed my master?" Anakin only replies with a simple yes, and Mara asks, "Why? How? How were you able to turn from the dark side?" Anakin replies, "The same reason you will turn from it, because of love for my son." Mara looks only confused by that statement and says after a few moments of thought, "Are you saying that Anakin Skywalker was the one who became Darth Vader, but you managed to overcome the darkness and free yourself from it to save your son?" Anakin gives no reply, and after a few seconds of quiet thought, Mara says, "And now you're saying I'll turn away from the dark side because of your son? Because of Luke?" Mara laughs, then continues, "That's ridiculous. I barely even know him." Anakin then replies, "And yet you feel it, don't you? You can't explain it, but you felt it the moment you first met him." Mara remains silent, but eventually blurts out, "If I betray Ren, he'll destroy me." Anakin simply replies, "Then help my son destroy Ren, and then what you see beyond that portal can become reality. You will finally know what love and happiness truly are." The scene then shifts again, and we're now with Ben, who stands in front of one of the portals, sobbing, having just witnessed a scene where he, many years from now, will murder his father. That's when the shadowy visage of Ren forms behind him and says, "Do not weep, young one, for when the day comes to do what you must, there will be no tears shed for your father. You will only feel a sense of freedom. You will be ready to become what you were born to be." Ben looks up at Ren and snaps back, "And what is that exactly?" Ren replies, "You are more special than you realize. Your grandfather was created by the Force itself to do that which no one else could do, to tame the dark side, to bend it to his will in order to keep a balance. But he was manipulated by a Sith, and like all others before him, he eventually was consumed by the dark side. He eventually lost himself to it. But it will be different for you." Ben then begins to wipe away his tears as he continues to listen. "You will learn to control the uncontrollable. You will rule the darkness, not be ruled by it. And that darkness has been gathering in strength for oh so long now, waiting to unleash its full fury." Ren then makes a motion of the hand towards the portal Ben stands in front of, and beyond it now we see an image of Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker together. Ren then says, "But as I have told you, to become a true master of the Force, you must learn the ways of the light side first from your uncle. And there is one who now stands in your way." Once again, the scene shifts, and we're now back with Luke as he watches the image of Anakin Skywalker fade away. Once completely gone, Luke lowers his head and lets out a soft sigh. That's when he hears the voice of Mara Jade call out his name. Luke's head then snaps up, and some distance away, he sees Mara just standing there. The two then run towards each other, but when they reach one another, they both stop mere inches apart and just stare awkwardly. Finally, Mara takes a step back, looks all around as if truly concerned, and says, "Where's Ben?" Luke shrugs and begins to look all around. I don't know, he says, "but I just had a rather strange experience, you could say." Mara nods and says back, "Yeah, so did I, and I'll tell you all about it later, but right now, we need to find Ben." Luke, looking concerned, asks why. Mara replies, "You're going to hate me, but this has all been a setup. I've been leading you to this tower on purpose so that Ren could be reborn within your nephew." Luke, looking a bit dumbfounded, blinks in confusion a few times, and then it dawns on him what she's just said, and he replies, "What? Why? And why are you telling me this now?" Mara shrugs and fumbles for words a bit before finally saying, I don't know really. To be completely honest with you, I just have this feeling, I guess. I don't know how to explain it." Luke then hesitantly says back, "I think I know exactly what you mean." Mara quickly flashes a smile and says that they can talk about it later, but that they have to find Ben now. Luke nods in agreement, and as he begins to look all around him, he asks if they should split up or if they should stick together. And when Mara doesn't respond, he turns back around to see that she's disappeared again. And once more then, the scene shifts, and we're again with Ben as he stands in the center of the large room by the same pedestal we've seen before, and resting upon it is the dagger. As he looks upon it, he says, "What's that for?" The shadowy visage of Ren reappears behind him and says, "It is both a weapon and key, one that you will use to help give me life again, for that is what once took it from me and left me as I am now, something that lingers between life and death." Ben takes a few steps towards it, picks it up and says as he looks it over, "And why would I want to give you life again?" Ren replies, "Because I will help you. I will lead you to your destiny. I can teach you the ways of the dark side when I am made whole again. After your uncle shows you the ways of the light, of course." Ben seems to consider all that for a moment, then says, "Why would you want to help me become so powerful, unless you plan to someday take it away from me, to become powerful yourself?" Ren then says, "As I told you, child, you are a Skywalker. You are special. You have the ability to master the Force, to destroy the past and create that which you desire to replace it." Again, Ben seems to consider all that before he says, "I still don't see what you get out of all this." Ren quickly replies, "I get life again, or should I say a chance to live for the very first time, and I will do it serving the most powerful being who has ever lived." Ben, still looking over the dagger, then says, "And if I do all this, I won't ever be afraid again, and these visions where people try and hurt me, where my uncle tries to hurt me, and this strange girl tries to hurt me, I'll be able to stop them." "Of course," Ren quickly says back. Finally, Ben smiles and asks, "Then tell me what I have to do." The scene then shifts yet again, and we're back with Mara Jade as she calls out for either Luke and or Ben. After some time of this, Mara comes across the pedestal in the middle of the room, though there is no dagger upon it anymore. As she moves towards it and takes a closer look, she jumps a little bit when Ben, with his hands behind his back, suddenly appears almost out of nowhere and asks her, "Where's my uncle?" Mara, after giving him a bit of an annoyed look, says, "I was just with him, but this tower, it's a tricky place. Thankfully, though, I at least found you, and now, together we can find him and get out of here finally." Ben then says, "And then what?" Mara gives him a look and asks what he means by that. Ben replies, "What happens after we get out of here? Do you think my uncle will still train me in the ways of the Jedi?" Mara, looking confused, replies, "Probably. I don't know, kid. Why are you asking me all this?" Ben tilts his head ever so slightly and says with an almost accusing look, "My uncle didn't ask you yet then, did he? He hasn't asked you to stay here with him forever yet, has he?" Mara laughs, but quickly stifles it when she sees that Ben is being very serious. She then says to him, "To stay with him here forever? Why would he ever ask me to do that?" But before Ben can answer, something seems to dawn on Mara, and she says, "Is that what Ren told you?" She then moves forward, crouches down in front of him, and says earnestly, "Listen to me, Ben. Everything Ren has told you is a lie." Ben quickly says back, "He said that's what you'd say." Mara frowns and asks, "And what else did he tell you?" Ben replies, "That you and my uncle care about each other, and that he's going to abandon me for you, that he won't train me because of you, because the Jedi won't be needed anymore." Mara doesn't seem to know what to say to any of that, but finally replies, "Look, kid, I don't know how I feel about your uncle, or how he feels about me, but I barely know him, and I certainly wouldn't stay here with him forever." "You're lying," Ben quickly says back. "I can tell. I've always been good at looking into people's minds and seeing the truth." Mara frowns, stands back up, and, along with a motion of her hand, indicating for him to get moving, says, "Come on, we gotta find Luke and get out of here. We'll straighten all this out later." Mara starts to turn to go, but Ben doesn't budge. She again frowns and says as she turns completely around, "Fine, kid, stay here then. Maybe when I find Luke, we really will just leave you here and run off together." Upon hearing that, Ben cries out in anger, and with uncanny speed, he takes the dagger he was hiding behind his back and lunges forward and stabs Mara with it. The scene then shifts, and we're now again with Luke, and he hears Mara scream out in pain, and instantly, he takes off running towards where he thinks it's come from. Moments later, he spots her laying face down on the floor, with a dagger in her back. And in a flash, Luke is crouched at her side, and though she's gasping for breath, Mara manages to say, "I know it's crazy, but I would have stayed with you. I would have stayed, Luke." Luke then mutters something, asking how she knew about that, but then he shuts his eyes to fight the mounting pain and anger, and when he again opens them, he asks, "Who did this?" Mara, her strength fading fast, manages to raise her hand to pull Luke's face a little bit closer, and she seems to whisper one word to him before taking her last breath. Luke then repeats what he thinks Mara has just said. Ren. Luke then lowers his head and touches his forehead to hers, and it's impossible to see what emotions might be on his face. That's when we see a ghastly-looking figure clad all in white, with long silvery hair, pale skin, and dark eyes materialize over the body of Mara Jade, and it reaches down to yank the dagger free from her back. Upon seeing this, Luke springs to his feet, ignites his green lightsaber, and demands to know who she is and what she wants. The ghastly figure ignores Luke as it looks over the blood-stained dagger and says so quietly to itself that we're unsure if Luke even hears or not. An evil act done of selfishness. The path of the dark side has been chosen. Uncertain the future is now. Luke then takes a step closer and raises his saber and takes a defensive stance. He once again demands to know what she's done. This time, the ghastly figure makes a slight flutter with one of its hands, and Luke's saber simply deactivates. Luke looks it over in amazement, tries to reactivate it, but nothing happens. That's when he takes a calming breath, shuts his eyes, and returns the saber to his belt and says, "Who are you?" She replies, "Before I was brought to this place, my parents named me Abeloth, but that's a name that I have not uttered nor heard in a very, very long time." Luke, after glancing down at Mara's body, then asks, "Were you a part of this?" Abeloth replies, "I was not. The Dark One took her life, and now there will be no balance." Luke's face darkens, and all he says is, "Ren." Abeloth gives a faint nod and says quietly, and mostly to herself, Yes, he will come to be known as Kylo Ren soon enough." Luke repeats the name Kylo Ren to himself, then says, "And how do I defeat him? How do I defeat this Kylo Ren?" Abeloth shuts her eyes, and after a long moment of silence replies, "I foresee that you will not be the one to defeat him, but you are meant to train the one who will, though I see reluctance in you, a lack of faith in yourself and the Jedi ways." Luke shakes his head and quickly says, "No, my doubt is only in myself, not in the Jedi ways." Abeloth says to that, "A great trial is set before you, one that may shake your faith, but it is you who is meant to train the one who can stop Ren." Luke considers all that for a moment, then asks, "Is it Ben you speak of? Is he the one who will defeat Ren, the one I must train?" Once more, Abeloth shuts her eyes, and says after a few seconds of silence, "I see a great battle being waged between Ben Solo and Kylo Ren, but the victor is impossible to tell." Luke takes a bold step forward and says, "Then tell me how to find Ren, and I will defeat him now. I'll save my nephew the burden of having to be the one to stop him." Abeloth seems to consider all that before saying, "Yes, you will find Ren, but you will find him when and where you least expect him, when you are least prepared to face his darkness, and he will destroy you if you are not careful." Luke frowns and wants to ask more, but Abeloth interrupts and says, "Time is short, and you must linger here no longer. Within me is the power of both the darkness and light, but I lack the knowledge and ability to control them. At this moment, the light is in control of me, but I already feel it slipping away, and very soon the darkness will take hold, and it will likely never let go again." Luke nods as if he understands, then says, "What can I do to help you?" "Nothing," she responds, "but with any luck, the bonds of this place will hold for some time yet, and many years will pass by in the galaxy. But if Ren is not defeated by then, if a new Jedi Order has not risen up and is able to challenge and stop me, I shall destroy all there is. That is why you must train the one who can defeat Ren." Luke then responds, "I understand, and I will train Ben if that is what he wants, for I will not force the life of a Jedi on another." After that's said, we see Abeloth's eyes suddenly darken even further, and she reaches out a tentacle-like hand and wraps it around Luke's neck. She then says to him, "The darkness takes hold. I am losing control." For some time we then watch as Luke struggles to break free of her hold, but there's nothing he can do. And on the verge of him losing consciousness, we hear a lightsaber ignite, and Luke manages to turn his head just enough to see Ahsoka standing nearby, wielding Anakin's old blue lightsaber. She then says, "Hello, Mother. It's been a long time." Upon hearing that, Abeloth calms down, and the light side seems to briefly take control again. She releases the hold on Luke, and he immediately stumbles backwards and away from her. "My daughter, is that truly you?" she says. Ahsoka nods and replies, "It is, Mother. It's me, and I'm here to help you for as long as I can." Abeloth shakes her head and says, No, no, you must go. You must get as far away from me as you can before the darkness takes over. But Ahsoka again shakes her head and says, No, Mother, you can never truly destroy me, not as long as the light exists. Just like my brother will always find a way to persist as long as there is darkness. Just then, we momentarily switch scenes and are taken back into the dark side cave where Ezra Bridger gave his life to buy Ahsoka and Sabine time to be able to escape and get to Mortis. And we see that Ezra is no longer being swarmed by the wraith-like shadows of the dark side, like we last saw him, but rather the darkness has coalesced into some type of strange-looking creature that has its hands on the sides of Ezra's head. And as we watch, Ezra cries out in pain as his body becomes twisted, stretched, and deformed. We then switch back and are again with Ahsoka and Abeloth as Luke looks on. Finally, we see Ahsoka turn to Luke and say, You have to go. Sabine has been by one of the portals. It'll take you back to the ship. But Luke shakes his head and says, No, I won't leave you. Ahsoka flashes a grim yet appreciative smile. But before she can say anything, Abeloth's eyes again go dark and sinister, and she extends one of her claws out and tries to take a hold of Ahsoka by the throat. But Ahsoka quickly responds, dodges the attack, and counters by swinging the saber and chopping off the claw-like hand. Abeloth then howls out in pain and anger, but within moments, the severed hand begins to regrow. Ahsoka again looks at Luke and this time says, Get Ben out of here, train him, stop Ren, and be ready, because one day she will break free of this place. Luke looks like he wants to argue against that, but doesn't know what to say. Ahsoka then angrily shouts at him to go already, before she turns towards Abeloth and charges, and plunges the lightsaber right through her chest. But instead of howling out in pain this time, Abeloth instead lets out a shriek-like laugh, before wrapping a tentacled hand around Ahsoka's throat, lifting her off her feet, and flinging her into a nearby pillar. We then watch as Luke's hand goes to the saber on his belt, his eyes determined and focused upon Abeloth. But that's when it's as if Luke hears something, and after a moment, he lowers his head a bit and nods as he says, I understand, to something or someone we simply cannot see. He then takes a last look at Ahsoka laying motionless on the floor, seems to whisper something like an apology, and then turns to go. Ahsoka, as she slowly begins to push herself up and off the floor, gives a slight grin when she sees that Luke is now moving away. That's when she hears the voice of Anakin Skywalker say to her, He's everything I should have been. And she looks up and sees the Force ghost of Anakin standing over her, watching as his son moves away. Ahsoka then says to him, Is it really you? Anakin flashes a grin and replies, Of course it's me, Snips. Didn't think I'd let you fight this one alone, did you? There is then a brief, awkward moment of silence before Ahsoka blurts out, I should have never left you. But Anakin quickly says back, No, you did the right thing. What happened, all of it was my fault. Just then Abeloth lets out an ear-piercing screech and looks like she's about to attack again. Anakin then says, I won't be much help against her. Ahsoka grins and says back, So I'll have to do most of the work as usual. Is that what you're saying? Anakin smiles and chuckles, but it quickly fades as he says, You know there's no way for us to win this one. Ahsoka gives a slight shrug and replies, Well, sounds like the same odds we've always faced. And yet, Anakin continues for her, and yet, we always found a way, didn't we? Both of them then fall silent, and Ahsoka, with Anakin standing behind her, raises her master's old lightsaber just as Abeloth begins to charge at them. Anakin then says, The longer we can keep her occupied, the longer it is before she'll start looking for a way out of here, which means the more time Luke will have to rebuild the Jedi Order and stop her when she finally does free herself. With that said, Abeloth reaches them, and there is a blinding flash of light, and that's when the scene shifts, and we're now with Ben and Sabine as they stand at one of the portals, watching as Luke quickly approaches them. That's when they all see the blinding flash of light, and Luke stops and looks like he wants to go back and help, but Ben, with a slightly nervous expression on his face, quickly asks, Where's Mara? Luke shuts his eyes against the pain and says, Ren killed her. Something like a look of relief washes over Ben's face, but it quickly fades after Luke says, And, Jedi way or not, I will find a way to destroy him for it. Without another word then, Luke looks into the portal, sees the jungle planet and ship they arrived on beyond it, and walks right through it. Sabine then tells Ben to come on, accompanied with a wave of the hand, and then she too walks through the portal. Ben then walks up to the threshold of the portal and says, All of this was a trick, wasn't it? The future I saw, where my uncle will try and kill me. I bring that upon myself, don't I? We then hear the voice of Ren respond, One day, Luke Skywalker will find a way to break the barrier I have put around your mind, and he will see what you have done this day, and he will see that you were the one that murdered, the one he could have loved. He will see that you and I are one and the same. Ben then shouts back, and he'll try to kill me for it. Ren responds, but the true irony for Luke Skywalker is that by trying to destroy you, he will destroy himself. Ben says back that he doesn't understand, and Ren continues, learn all you can from him. Learn the ways of the light, and when the time comes, you will be ready to learn the ways of the darkness and become a true master of the Force. Ben frowns and then asks, and what about this girl I see, the one that will try and stop me? The voice of Ren replies, you needn't worry about her. She's no one. We then switch scenes for the last time, and find ourselves on the planet Jakku, in the middle of the desert and just outside a run-down looking hut. And from within that hut, we can hear the screams of a baby, and the shouts of angry parents arguing about how they're going to take care of her. And that's when we see, standing on a nearby sand dune, the Force ghosts of Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano, along with a very colorful convoy. Ahsoka then says, who is she? Anakin shrugs and replies, she's no one, not yet. But one day, the Force will awaken in her, and she'll challenge and stop Ren, before hopefully rebuilding the Jedi Order so that they can defeat Abeloth. Ahsoka gives a skeptical look and says, that's a lot to ask from her. Can she handle it alone? Anakin shakes his head, and as he does, the convoy takes flight and heads towards the hut, and stops to perch upon it. He then says, she'll never be alone, though for most of her life she'll feel like she is. But we will be with her, helping her however we can, and we'll direct her to Luke when the time comes. Ahsoka nods but then asks, and what of Luke? Anakin then lowers his head a bit and says, everything is always in motion, and the future is impossible to know for certain, but the loss of Mara has wounded him deeper than he even realizes yet. Ahsoka, looking slightly confused, asks, but he hardly knew her. How could he have such strong feelings for her? Anakin replies, the same way I knew the first time I laid eyes upon Padme that I would love her for the rest of my life, that the will of the Force had brought us together. Ahsoka seems ever more confused and says, but you were meant to be the chosen one. You were meant to take the Father's place on Mortis and balance the Force, to make sure Ren never again rose up, and that Abeloth would stay imprisoned till the ending of time. Anakin replies to all that, yes, but I was never meant to do it all alone. The Force understands that beings require love, but it doesn't know why that is, or grasp the power love can have over a person. It only knows we need it. The Force is infinite in knowledge, but not wisdom. That's why it needs us. That's why the Wills created us from it. To learn. Ahsoka frowns and says she doesn't understand. Anakin rests a hand on her shoulder and says, when we're done here, we will cross over to the Cosmic Force, and much will become clear then. Ahsoka then asks, will we ever return here, to the living Force like this, in this form? Anakin shrugs, I can't say for sure. Time takes on a different meaning there, and the cracks between the living Force and the cosmic are thin. But we will watch and guide them the best we can from there. We will see to it that, one day, this girl from Jakku makes her way to Luke, and with any luck, they will find a way to help each other. And that is how this story ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time, and now I'd like to take a moment to thank all the names you see on your screen who helped with the art on this story, before thanking all of you who watched and got to the end. As I've said before, I was a little ambitious with the scope and scale of this story, and there were a few subplots that got ditched along the way, not to mention the main story did get a bit trimmed down. Nevertheless, I do hope you all enjoyed it, and until the next story begins, thanks for watching.